a crusade against overpopulation. An extensive and threatening topic nobody dares to address. Planet Earth and its inhabitants are suffering from diverse ills caused singularly and exclusively by man himself. These already existing ills, however, will continue to proliferate until finally everything completely deteriorates. The Earth's population is plagued by famines, energy shortages, epidemics, environmental pollution, degeneration, terrorism, dictatorship, anarchism, slavery, excessive increase of waste materials, racial hatred, food shortages, destruction of rainforests, the greenhouse effect, pollution of lakes, streams and oceans, hatred towards asylum-seekers, radioactive emissions, chemical pollution of water, air, plants, food, human beings and animals. Crime, murder, mass murders, manslaughter, alcoholism, hatred of strangers, oppression, hatred of one's fellowman, extremism, sectarianism, drug addiction, overpopulation, annihilation of animal species, war, violence, torture and capital punishment, general mismanagement, water contamination, eradication of plant species, hatred, vice, jealousy, lovelessness, lack of logic, false humanitarianism, lack of housing, increased traffic, destruction of arable land, unemployment, the collapse of health care, the collapse of care for the elderly, destruction of nature, the collapse of solid waste removal, and the lack of living space, among others. In spite of the many efforts, mankind's problems are not decreasing but, instead, continue to rise steadily in direct proportion to population increases. Mankind on Earth has always tried to fight an old ill with a new one, but, truthfully, this path is leading to man's final destruction. The scenario may be compared to a debt that grows immeasurably to the point where it can no longer even be paid, as is the case when an individual goes into debt and attempts to pay it off by going further into debt only to furnish security for this debt by incurring an even greater debt. The same holds true when humankind on Earth fights old ills with new ones. Yet humanity on Earth frequently acts and thinks completely illogically, which is why it attempts contrary to reason to eliminate an old ill by introducing a newly contrived, newly produced one. This is illogical in every way. When an energy source becomes depleted, man on Earth simply plans and builds new, more powerful nuclear, oil, coal, and hydropower plants. He does this regardless of the fact that through the utilization of these very same nuclear power plants, as well as the petroleum and coal power plants, he immensely pollutes the environment even further. Additionally, nuclear radiation may leak from atomic power plants, thereby endangering all terrestrial life. Moreover, these new energy sources will have become partially outdated already, or inadequate, upon completion over a 3-7-year construction period. Furthermore, these plants tend not to meet the new energy demands because, very likely, birth rate increases have not remained stable during construction periods. Indeed, it is likely that overpopulation has busily escalated over this same period. Hundreds of millions of people are born worldwide during the construction phase of a power plant and, of course, these millions of newborn human beings once again will require additional energy. It is obvious also that the incessant increase in the Earth's population is sending the demand for energy into an upward spiral. Because of these tremendous energy demands, the Earth must be exploited at an ever-increasing speed. As a result, ever more nuclear power plants, along with other types of power plants, must be constructed and put into service, thereby increasingly endangering and destroying all life forms. Other sources of endangerment and destruction to the planet and all life yet exist. For example, come the unscrupulous use of chemicals, the American HAARP project in Alaska, nuclear testing and the commercial use of atomic bombs for the creation of lakes, waterways and subterranean expanses to be used as storage areas for rubble, sewage, solid waste and nuclear waste products. Mention must also be made of the clearing of rainforests and the burning of forests to criminally access parcels of land for construction sites, etc. Additionally, there are criminal sport activities which depend on combustion engines that burn gas, alcohol, gasoline or diesel oil, to name but a few. It is an idiosyncrasy of the earth human beings, due to their unreasonable and purely materialistic thinking processes, to think and act inappropriately in almost every matter. They act illogically in many ways as well, and as a result, they do so also with respect to the problem of hunger throughout the world. They create numerous humanitarian organizations in order to collect funds, food and other goods to help the starving and suffering population. Yet, all the while, they manage on one hand to legally siphon off 40% of the collected funds into their own pockets as expenses and, on the other hand, they abet, advance and tolerate the overpopulation explosion problem. Through these ostensibly humane acts, though truthfully inhumane acts of destruction, the suffering of humankind on earth is not diminished and the problems of hunger are not being resolved. Instead, suffering and hunger continue to grow to even greater levels. Misunderstood charity and humanitarianism, as well as their subsequently misdirected assistance, are all primarily spawned by a totally false humanitarianism. As a rule, such false humanitarianism originates from the influence of religions, sectarianism and other false teachings, none of which are love, charity and humanitarianism. In fact, such false teachings spawn even greater and more difficult problems than those already in existence. Irresponsible and without a single thought to actual matters of truth, without true commitment or respect for life and the fulfillment of the natural creative laws and directives, many people carelessly give relief, thereby furthering this non-aid and the destruction of life even more. Not only misunderstood sympathy and sectarian influences play a major role in this scenario, but also the fact that many people cling to such relief campaigns in order to calm their own guilty consciences for being more prosperous in some way. These people fail to realize that they and their countrymen have earned this higher standard of living in the civilized country where they live, mainly by keeping population growth figures low or at least on a more reasonable level than peoples of so-called underdeveloped countries. People in the underdeveloped nations carelessly and irresponsibly procreate like guinea pigs or rabbits only to starve afterwards and shout for help. They lack real help in the format of a birth rate control. Wherever possible, false humanitarians donate goods and funds to Bread for Brothers, Hunger Throughout the World, and similar programs. They have no idea that in so doing they are acting against reason and are interfering in nature's work which ultimately defends itself through famines. Likewise, they may not want to hear of such things. Starving people are procreated by the hundreds and millions through sympathy that is contrary to nature's ways, and a charity that results from false humanitarianism. Through our voluntary or forcibly decreed birth rate check, these happenings could be avoided. Through the excess of the great human mass, mankind's problems are continuously increasing, and it must suffer privation and begins to slowly destroy faunal and floral life along with the planet itself. Once the starving people have been saved from a death of starvation, they become well-nourished, healthy and robust once again, and immediately begin through the lack of information regarding birth control to procreate in an uncontrolled manner by having children in large numbers that amount to many millions each year. Not only does this procreation immediately create further problems of hunger and energy demands, but it also leads to medical, spatial and financial problems, to name but a few. Likewise, the descendants of these people once again compound terrestrial mankind's excessive growth problem. Once these offspring become older and sexually mature, they also promptly begin procreating their own children and, once again, new descendants are conceived in even greater numbers, etc., faster and ever faster. During an extremely brief time period, the Earth will become even more overpopulated. In 1978, 4 billion people inhabited the Earth. In 2000, there will exist already 7 billion inhabitants. Because of this steady and incessant increase of overpopulation, each and every other problem becomes excessively, immeasurably and increasingly compounded. These problems will affect every facet of human life, indeed, the very life of the planet itself and its fauna and flora. In the coming decades, as man's degeneration on Earth relentlessly increases, so will that of the planet and nature. Alone the looming ozone layer depletion caused by man's own actions will initiate unforeseen suffering upon the entire planet, including all life forms, in much the same manner as a particular human immune deficiency, which today is already spreading epidemically. As a result of wars and revolutions, among other things, veritable migrations of entire nations will soon take place as people begin to flee their homelands to seek asylum elsewhere. This migrant flow will lead to hatred of strangers, hatred of asylum-seekers and other races. It will result in severe unrest, murders by all types of extremists and others. The drug abuse epidemic and international political terrorism shall run rampant. Recession and inflation will reappear and millions of people will be without work and income. Criminality and organized crime will spread on a massive scale. The mass murder of individuals will become commonplace, including the mass murder of people for religious, sectarian and political delusional reasons. The destruction of the environment will increasingly ensue, while the planet itself is exploited and tortured. However, nature and the planet will avenge themselves of this abuse through unusually severe storms, typhoons, cyclones, hurricanes, and huge infernos. Entire forests, fields and other territories will be incinerated. Many gigantic fires will be ablaze. Horrendously violent storms will sweep across the earth with a severity not yet witnessed since time immemorial. Horrendous droughts, gigantic tsunamis, masses of snow, hail and much more, will plague the earth and its inhabitants. Ancient, dormant volcanoes will awaken and negatively influence the earth's climate. Active volcanoes will rumble with increased activity, and savage earthquakes will shake the ground ever more frequently. The irresponsible commercial use and testing of atomic bombs and other explosives will contribute to this turmoil as they reverberate through the earth. With a current population of about 6.5 billion terrestrial inhabitants 1998, the earth is far beyond its capability to support and feed such a mass routinely, on a fundamental, natural and healthy basis. A basis where neither human effort and intrusion into nature, the raping of nature nor the exploitation of its resources to produce more food need occur, and where no one need suffer from hunger. The truth is that Earth is a wondrous planet, but it has only the capacity to support and feed in every way and in abundance 529 million people. Mankind, on the other hand, has generated a gigantic, excessive population, and is now forced to spur all vegetable and fruit production to atypical, extreme achievements through the use of chemicals and hybrids. As though this were not enough, the exploitation of the planet has accelerated dramatically, including the expansion and recovery of raw materials from the earth and the unrelentingly rising demand from the earth for all types of other materials, a direct result of the growing overpopulation. No one mentions the destruction of arable land due to this madness called overpopulation. No one speaks of the use of toxic chemicals nor of the expansion of housing areas and the like. Food for human consumption is laden with chemical additives and consists these days largely of artificially produced chemicals, also a fact that is not mentioned. Originally, the population of each region on Earth was only as large as that region could feed and support in accordance with nature's ways. Toxic chemicals, other types of poisons, new plant hybrids, as well as overly intensive exploitation of the ground, were completely unknown. However, this condition changed dramatically during the Middle Ages, particularly at the time of the Great French Revolution. For it was during this period that the crazy notion originated, suggesting the need for a larger population who would rise up against the authorities. The masses wanted to overthrow the government. To have the capability of doing so, and to become powerful and mighty, the populace prodded themselves for larger numbers of progeny. Christianity and its sects, but Catholicism in particular, were party to this endeavor. Powerful as ever, Catholicism was preaching, as part of its false and insane teachings, that people should be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. This slogan, even today, is vigorously preached by the Catholic head honcho and his cassock cohorts. The catchphrase remains in circulation throughout the world today for the sole purpose of acquiring little sheep and busy little teething pairs. The results have produced guinea pig-like human reproduction. Clearly, the ensuing overpopulation has meant large requirements for more food, energy, raw materials, as well as many other goods. In the way of food alone, mankind will ultimately arrive at a point where all natural produce becomes a rarity, since the insatiable demands for the provision of food for mankind's out-of-control masses can only be satisfied by totally producing staples from chemicals. In part this already holds true today, for food requirements have soared relentlessly in the past few decades. Yet, food provision problems are not unique and have grown continuously, as have the problems of energy shortage. Man on Earth is threatened by worldwide total contamination, destruction, and the manifold ills of extinction. Lists a yard long can be compiled that describe how every earthly life form is being endangered, destroyed, exterminated and annihilated. Yet, man continues to remain ignorant of the damage he has inflicted on nature, the planet and all types of life existing upon it. And now terrestrial man, the planet and life in general, have reached the point where everything stands on its last leg, direct result of people clinging to false charity and false humanitarianism. These individuals are behaving and acting in much the same criminal manner as those officials in responsible government positions, government agencies and relief organizations who do their best to sound the death knell on the last remnants of life on planet Earth, now channeled into a path leading to its own final and irrevocable annihilation. The blame for this situation rests with those individuals also who, lacking responsibility and initiative, have relinquished their authority for making productive changes by uttering the primitive and absurd phrases, "What can I do by myself?" or, "Of course, I'll help also if others go along with it," etc., etc. Anyone thinking in this manner is neither worthy nor fit to live, in the same way that people are unfit who relentlessly promote even further the madness of unremitting overpopulation through false humanitarianism, false charity and others. These individuals are contributing to the fact that terrestrial mankind's problems are reaching immeasurable levels, problems that surpass even those currently in existence and others yet to come. Anyone thinking like this or believing that the world is now in order, is shunning progress and abetting the destruction and annihilation of the world and all life forms on it. Mankind's horrendous ills originate from and exist through overpopulation with its unrelenting, irresponsibly continuing escalation. The situation dictates that any ill can only be fought and remedied by grasping it by its roots, ripping it out and destroying it. The numbers of terrestrial humankind must be drastically reduced. The only humane method by which this reduction ill can be achieved is through stringent birth control regulations that permit married couples, of a predetermined age, to have only a strictly specified number of children. This regulation must prevail over any excuse, argument, fear and/or stupid comment from those numbskulls who claim, for military, religious, social, egoistical, false humanitarian reasons, or those of false charity, that a large number of offspring is necessary, or that birth control is contrary to religious beliefs and is inhumane, etc. These inane claims are made singularly by rigid egotists, sectarians or people unfit to live at those who have not the faintest idea of nature's laws, directives or truthful logic. Terrestrial mankind's existing major problems can only be resolved through a purposeful birth control program, by which the population is reduced to an optimum level and scaled according to the planet. all other problem-solving measures present trite, singularly miserable, pitiful and useless attempts that barely amount to the proverbial drop in the bucket. Such problem-solving attempts only serve instead to increase all ills and difficulties even further. Is population control barbaric, inhumane and uncharitable? No. On the contrary, for it is only when a person begins to ponder these facts logically, if he or she has not done so already and come to the same truthful conclusions, that he or she finds the truth coinciding with the aforementioned argument. Only illogically thinking people, who cling to false charity and false humanitarianism, deny the truth. Such people are forced into this rut by sectarian machinations and false teachings, which cause them to grovel like dogs and rob them of all healthy, reasonable, normal and truthful thoughts, feelings and actions. In this manner they are dominated purely by pity, self-pity, feeble-mindedness and illogic, in place of feelings of empathy for all life forms. Respect for and toward true life is ultimately destroyed by the illogical thinkers, who pave the way for false humanitarianism and false charity that turn into purulent boils capable of spreading as epidemics. The truth, in regard to the clarification of mistakes and guilt, has always been damn hard to take, and seldom does an individual accept harsh truths without grumbling and complaining. Man on earth has always felt attacked personally when someone speaks and offers the truth. He simply exalts himself above everything and believes to be free from error and guilt, which is the reason for his inability to bear the truth. He rebels against it if the truth does not correspond with his own erroneous opinion. Truly, however, man's behavior is nothing more than sordid cowardice that infects everyone who is capable of comprehending issues in a halfway normal way. Since times immemorial, the truth, along with true love, charity and humanitarianism, has invariably sounded harsh, because each one forces the human being to think and act in a logical manner. The same holds true also for the resolution of terrestrial humankind's problems. Only through population reduction, by way of the strictest birth control measures, can there be a remedy for all existing major ills. Inhumane aid must not be given to people. The universal laws of nature apply to humans on earth, too, and anyone with an open eye can easily recognize them wherever there is a region in which the population of a particular animal species suddenly increases, and the danger exists whereby the area involved cannot feed the increasing population. Epidemics occur that decimate the increasing and excessive animal population. Furthermore, the same is evident also when excessively large populations simply starve to death or fall prey to their natural foes because they are weak from hunger. For it is through this method that nature keeps its natural populations in balance, allowing only as many faunal life forms to live in any one region as there is food for support. Only man, the thinking creature, acts contrary to this natural law and tramples upon it. Contrary to faunal life forms, man procreates his offspring to an excessive degree. For some time now, fertile regions capable of providing food have become so overpopulated that the land can no longer be cultivated, nor can it provide sufficient food for everyone. The flip side of this coin is that people flock by the millions to cities built upon formerly fertile, arable ground. Man then imports food supplies from other regions where fields for gardening and agriculture have remained available, yet those demanding food have never even had to lift one finger towards the planting, maintenance or harvesting of it. Man fancies himself as being the crown of creation. Indeed, he believes that by having the capability to think he is allowed to regard himself as superior to everything else. Thus, he believes he is entitled to permit planet-wide, human overpopulation, and that he can ignore the laws and directives of nature and trample them with his feet. In his megalomaniac delusions of grandeur, man has already shown himself to be so inhumane, uncharitable and feeble-minded as to allow everything around him to degenerate into limitless cowardice. His realistic and reasonable thinking, along with true love, charity, humanitarianism and love of truth, have all become completely desensitized. Hence, he is no longer able to recognize that terrestrial humankind's major problems are caused by the liability of overpopulation. This situation can only be relieved by the strictest birth control measures. Instead of acknowledging this truth, mankind criminally forms and supports relief organizations that create more harm than benefit. These organizations do not instruct and bring about birth control measures to the effect that millions and millions are procreated all over the world and force all major problems beyond normal boundaries. Well-to-do individuals support the machinations of relief organizations with exorbitant sums merely to calm their guilty consciences, which is a direct result of their false humanitarianism and false charity. These so-called helpers cowardly cheat their own consciences because they are incapable of recognizing the truthful truth and acting accordingly. Hence, their aid is misdirected toward the wrong places and points of concern. Through their direct participation, therefore, they become guilty by being responsible for the unfolding of this increasing, unrelentingly multiplying, worldwide misery and plight, along with the many catastrophes and ills associated with it. The mistaken people who provide relief aid in the wrong areas, the pseudo-humanitarians and overpopulation promoters, must also be held responsible for the numerous other ills, indeed, the major crimes taking place on earth. Part and parcel of these crimes are torture and capital punishment, both of which are still practiced in many countries today. Among the people supporting and fighting for torture and capital punishment are those human elements, who frequently represent and fight for religions and other sectarianism. They also provide aid to fight hunger and are against birth control measures, thereby opening the gate to a paradox beyond compare. On one hand, they are fighting for the survival of innumerable individuals, while on the other hand, they murder, torture and destroy a human life that has either become guilty of a crime, a criminal or politically revolutionary act or opinion. Does this make sense? No one wants to listen to the concept that pseudo-relief aid will generate once again the procreation of many hundred millions of people. Of those, millions are becoming new criminals, drug addicts and various forms of extremists, including people who commit serious crimes, etc. Though, people will turn a deaf ear to the overpopulation issue. It is because of mistaken, illogical people who have given relief aid, who scorn creation, and who are pseudo-humanitarians and other types of overpopulation mongers, that the earth is impregnated with the seeds of many different ills. From such seeds there sprout and mature the destruction that burdens the entire globe under an assortment of varying names. However, the most prominent ill of all, indeed the one that causes the greatest destruction worldwide, is overpopulation. It is from overpopulation that the delusion of hatred of strangers, racial hatred, hatred towards the asylum-seekers and one's fellowmen originate, as well as sectarianism in the form of religious, profane, esoteric, ufological, philosophical, non-denominational or special interest groups, not to mention the sectarianism of major religions. This entire overpopulation phenomenon results in crime and wars, epidemics of drug addiction, prescription drugs abuse, alcoholism, tobacco addiction, solvent sniffing, sadism, masochism and many other plights to which human beings fall prey. These epidemics are becoming more blatant and numerous through the unconstrained growth of the world's total population. This is a proven fact that cannot be ignored or kept secret any longer. It is those overpopulation mongers only who close their eyes to this fact and truth and make themselves guilty of crimes against humanity. They wish neither to acknowledge this fact nor to admit to the truth of it. Why is this? Why do these overpopulation mongers, who in this manner commit crimes against humanity, neither wish to see, hear, recognize, acknowledge nor accept the truth and the fact of global ills and destruction? The answer is not a simple one. It is a fact that the reasons vary greatly from falling prey to alcoholism, drug addiction, prescription drugs abuse, tobacco addiction, solvent sniffing, sadism and masochism, to the sectarianism of a religious, non-denominational, special interest group, philosophical, esoteric, perhaps psychological, spiritualistic nature or sectarian ideologies of major religions. The reasons may vary also from war, murder and crime, hatred of strangers, racial hatred, hatred towards the asylum-seekers to hatred of one's fellowman. It is erroneous, therefore, to assume that only a single reason need apply to all the excesses mentioned. Truthfully, the reasons causing extremist, as well as sectarian ideologies and addictions of all types, can be subdivided into 1,000 variations, many of which are listed below. 1. An inability to live. 2. Vice. 3. Lack of self-control. 4. Impairment of the psyche. 5. Sectarian propaganda. 6. Propaganda by special interest groups. 7. Political propaganda. 8. Segregation from others. 9. Euphoria. 10. Unemployment. 11. Fearfulness phobias. 12. Disease. 13. Subsistence problems. 14. Contact problems. 15. Problems with one's fellowman. 16. Communication problems. 17. Frustration. 18. Lack of feelings. 19. Schizophrenia. 20. Maniacal beliefs. 21. Deception. 22. Compulsion. 23. Terrorism. 24. Despotism. 25. Misleading education. 26. Failure to identify truth. 27. Self-irresponsibility. 28. Search for something superior. 29. Search for life's meaning. 30. Search for truth. 31. Social grievances. 32. Hatred of any type. 33. Veracity. 34. Recklessness. 35. Vindictiveness. 36. Bloodthirstiness. 37. Homicidal mania. 38. Family problems. 39. Cold feelings. 40. Excessive emotions. 41. Heartache. 42. Lies. 43. Deception. 44. Megalomania. 45. Arrogance. 46. Conceit. 47. Adulation. 48. Government confusion. 49. Political confusion. 50. War or revolution. 51. Any type of confusion. 52. Altercations. 53. Feuds. 54. Grief. 55. Affliction of harm. 56. Lack of knowledge. 57. Arbitrariness. 58. General mismanagement. 59. Subjugation of any type. 60. Identity crisis. 61. Inconsistency. 62. Weak-mindedness. 63. Lack of initiative. 64. Lack of conviction. 65. Thoughtlessness. 66. Breach of trust. 67. Adultery. 68. Breach of friendship. 69. Breach of promises. 70. False promises. 71. Melancholy. 72. Depression. 73. Dejectedness. 74. Exaggerated ebullience. 75. Loneliness. 76. A craving for the unusual. 77. A craving for depravity. Animals. Crime, murder, mass murders, manslaughter, alcoholism, hatred of strangers, oppression, hatred of one's fellowman, extremism, sectarianism, drug addiction, overpopulation, annihilation of animal species, war, violence, torture and capital punishment, general mismanagement, water contamination, eradication of plant species, hatred, vice, jealousy, lovelessness, lack of logic, false humanitarianism, lack of housing, increased traffic, destruction of arable land, unemployment, the collapse of health care, the collapse of care for the elderly, destruction of nature, the collapse of solid waste removal, and the lack of living space, among others. In spite of the many efforts, mankind's problems are not decreasing but, instead, continue to rise steadily in direct proportion to population increases. Mankind on Earth has always tried to fight an old ill with a new one, but, truthfully, this path is leading to man's final destruction. The scenario may be compared to a debt that grows immeasurably to the point where it can no longer even be paid, as is the case when an individual goes into debt and attempts to pay it off by going further into debt, only to furnish security for this debt by incurring an even greater debt. The same holds true when humankind on Earth fights old ills with new ones. Yet humanity on Earth frequently acts and thinks completely illogically, which is why it attempts contrary to reason to eliminate an old ill by introducing a newly contrived, newly produced one. This is illogical in every way. When an energy source becomes depleted, man on Earth simply plans and builds new, a crusade against overpopulation. An extensive and threatening topic nobody dares to address. Planet Earth and its inhabitants are suffering from diverse ills caused singularly and exclusively by man himself. These already existing ills, however, will continue to proliferate until finally everything completely deteriorates. The Earth's population is plagued by famines, energy shortages, epidemics, environmental pollution, degeneration, terrorism, dictatorship, anarchism, slavery, excessive increase of waste materials, racial hatred, food shortages, destruction of rainforests, the greenhouse effect, pollution of lakes, streams and oceans, hatred towards asylum-seekers, radioactive emissions, chemical pollution of water, air, plants, food, human beings and more powerful nuclear, oil, coal, and hydropower plants. He does this regardless of the fact that through the utilization of these very same nuclear power plants, as well as the petroleum and coal power plants, he immensely pollutes the environment even further. Additionally, nuclear radiation may leak from atomic power plants, thereby endangering all terrestrial life. Moreover, these new energy sources will have become partially outdated already, or inadequate, upon completion over a 3-7-year construction period. Furthermore, these plants tend not to meet the new energy demands because, very likely, birth rate increases have not remained stable during construction periods. Indeed, it is likely that overpopulation has busily escalated over this same period. Hundreds of millions of people are born worldwide during the construction phase of a power plant and, of course, these millions of newborn human beings once again will require additional energy. It is obvious also that the incessant increase in the Earth's population is sending the demand for energy into an upward spiral. Because of these tremendous energy demands, the Earth must be exploited at an ever-increasing speed. As a result, ever more nuclear power plants, along with other types of power plants, must be constructed and put into service, thereby increasingly endangering and destroying all life forms. Other sources of endangerment and destruction to the planet and all life yet exist. For example, come the unscrupulous use of chemicals, the American HAARP project in Alaska, nuclear testing and the commercial use of atomic bombs for the creation of lakes, waterways and subterranean expanses to be used as storage areas.